Chapter 121, Hanzo the Salamander. Who are you? When Jingi snapped his fingers, several puppets hurled themselves into the mouth of the poisonous salamander fish and detonated in a chain of self-destruction. The explosions pulverized the beast's internal organs and blew its skull apart. The massive creature collapsed into a motionless, lifeless heap in the camp. Despicable. Hanzo's hair bristled with fury as he darted through the smoke, scythe in hand, charging at Jingi with murder in his eyes. His summoned beast had been killed. Jingi would pay for it. Nara Shikaku watched the salamander's tragic end and swallowed hard. The power of those suicide puppets was terrifying. Jingi walked calmly to the corpse. This was perfect puppet material. He couldn't leave it behind. The demigod could wait. He'd get closer first. Realizing Hanzo's body flicker was too fast to be caught directly, the remaining puppets along his path stopped attacking and detonated instead. Their explosions slammed into Hanzo, slowing and wounding him as he closed in. "Damn it!" Hanzo roared, rage making him reckless. Watching Jingi collect the salamander's corpse drove him nearly mad. Anyone would be furious in his place. Nara Shikaku felt a flicker of sympathy for the demigod. If he had stayed on the battlefield, this might never have happened. Attacking the camp had been a fatal gamble. Having secured the salamander, Jingi signaled. The surviving puppets retreated to his sides and returned to him. He inspected the cost. Over 100 puppets lost this round, but the prize was worth it. Puppets made from enemy corpses had limits. None of them could lock onto Hanzo quickly enough. Jingi simply reclaimed the pieces. "Die!" Hanzo screamed and hurled his chained scythe directly at Jingi's face, following up with a flash of movement to finish him. "Watch out!" Nara Shikaku shouted. Jingi raised a hand as the blade arced toward him. The scythe veered inexplicably, missed its mark, and clattered to the ground at Jingi's feet. Hanzo gaped for a heartbeat, then a violent suction ripped through the air, dragging him toward Jingi. Not good. Hanzo had never been caught by anything like this. Acting on instinct, he tore off his gas mask, yanked on the chain, and flung the fallen scythe backward. The blade spun toward Jingi's lower back, but a glowing green orb materialized and intercepted it with a ringing clang. The scythe, a weapon forged with a great deal of chakra metal, snapped cleanly in two. Hanzo staggered, his prized weapon broken. "Golden Wheel reincarnation," Jingi shouted. A streak of golden light flashed faster than Hanzo could react and pierced through him. Before Hanzo could recover, Jingi was at his side, green chakra coating his hand as he gripped the demigod's neck and lifted him up. Who exactly are you?" Hanzo croaked, blood bubbling at the corner of his lips, disbelief in his eyes. Could someone from the Hyuga clan be this terrifying? What had broken his scythe? What was that lethal golden strike that had gone through him? "Your enemy." Jingi's voice was steady. He kept Hanzo suspended to prevent the salamander's ruptured innards from releasing any lingering poison. "I'm sorry, but I promised someone I would win this war." Hanzo's life bled away fast. Coughing blood, he rasped one last question. "Why? Didn't you act earlier?" Suspicion had been Hanzo's nature. If Jingi had shown his strength earlier, Hanzo never would have risked a final assault on the camp. That arrogance had cost him everything. "Because I'm a medical ninja," Jingi said with a slight grin. The words Hanzo like another blow. His eyes widened with a look of crushed grievance as blood spattered down his chin. He coughed once, hard, and then his chest stilled. Perhaps he had died of anger itself. Nara Shikaku watched the expression of the demigod in his last moment and felt a brief, silent pity, 3 seconds of mourning for a great warrior undone by an unscrupulous medical ninja. "Senior, the rest is yours. I want this one," Jingi said, turning to the medics. The poisonous salamander fish made perfect puppet material, and the demigod himself was too valuable to leave unclaimed. Jingi sealed the now-dead, unbowed Hanzo into a sealing scroll and collected the broken scythe. The chakra metal within it was precious. Refined and sold, it would buy many more puppet parts. "All right, you go rest. I'll handle the rest." With Hanzo dead, the remaining rain ninjas would no longer pose a major threat. This raid had drained the Land of Rain's last reserves. What came next for the village was easy to predict. But none of that mattered to Jingi now. His mission had been accomplished. He'd treated countless wounded, earned the gratitude of many, killed Hanzo, and bolstered his own reputation. Those deeds would spread through the village and give him a layer of protection. Anyone who sought to target him would now have to think twice. When he finally turned, the medics in the treatment room and the Anbu station nearby were all looking at him with admiration. Chapter 122, The Gears of Fate Are Inevitable. Jingi, you're amazing! Teacher! The two kids were deliriously excited, jumping up and down. Jingi smiled slightly and waved them off, signaling Nawaki and Little Yellow Hair to hurry back and not run around until the battle was completely over. Stepping on an explosive tag or inhaling Hanzo of the Salamander's venom now would be fatal. No jokes. The fight was winding down. Even without Hanzo, the Rain Village ninjas had been no match for Konoha's forces. With Hanzo dead, the battle became one-sided. With Nara Shikaku's presence and orders, the Konoha ninjas announced Hanzo's death, and the Rain forces' morale crumbled. Fighters without spirit scattered, and Konoha's troops only needed to chase them down. The sounds of slaughter faded into the distance. The battle ended not long after, but the camp was still chaotic. The medical tents swarmed with wounded waiting to be treated. What worried everyone most was the lingering venom from Hanzo scattered across the camp. Incoming and outgoing shinobi had to pick their way around it. They would have to wait for it to dissipate. Getting through the battle, only to be poisoned afterward by inhaling that venom, would be an unbearable irony. It's over. Having finished what he had to do, Nara Shikaku sank down onto the ground, unmindful of his dignity. The war that had dragged on for nearly a year was finally over. The land of Rain, once a looming threat, was no longer dangerous. If Hanzo had lived, Rain might still have staged a comeback. With him gone, that hope was gone, at least until an organization like the Akatsuki could rise. Whether the future leaders of such a group would actually come to power remained an open question. "Senior, can't you change your clothes?" Jingi asked. Shikaku was soaked and caked in mud. He'd even sat on the ground. Shikaku chuckled and waved him off. "Cough, I'm just happy. Next, we'll wait a bit for the wounded to rest. Let the squads return, then pack up and head back to the village," he said as he stood. "You've been working all night. Get some rest. I won't keep you." "Okay." Jingi didn't insist. Though the battle was over, they both still had work to do. The medical tents were overflowing. As the medic in charge, Jingi would be busy for a while. Shikaku wasn't off duty either. He had to call back the field squads, organize supplies, and prepare the return to Konoha. But the most tedious task by far would be the battle reports and merit evaluations. Who earned what? How many merits each person gained? What rewards to issue? As camp commander, those records had to be written by him and then sent to the Hokage's office for the third Hokage's approval. The third couldn't be bothered with the paperwork, so it fell to Shikaku. Squads crisscrossed the field, recalling units back to camp. "Has the war ended? Can we go home?" "That's great, Lord Jingi. You're awesome. We're finally going home." Even before an official announcement, Hanzo's death made it obvious. The war was over. Cheers rose when the news spread. Is it really over? Orochimaru pulled off his raincoat. He'd been leading a pursuit when someone ran up to inform him Hanzo was dead. "Lord Orochimaru, should we keep pursuing?" someone asked. Their eyes betrayed how much they wanted to return home. Orochimaru said. With Hanzo gone, the remaining Rain forces were no longer worth the effort. Squads that received the recall returned to camp and then asked for details. When they heard Jingi had single-handedly taken down Hanzo, the demigod, many found it hard to believe. A demigod just died like that? It seemed too sudden. Jingi-kun is always full of surprises. Orochimaru went straight to the medical tent. "You're back. Where's Jiraiya?" Jingi, checking a patient, didn't look up. "I don't know." Orochimaru smiled faintly. "Not long ago he rescued 3 kids and has stayed with them." 3 kids? Jingi straightened. Could it be that coincidence after all? Had the flap of a butterfly's wings not stirred up a tempest, or had fate still found its course? Orochimaru leaned against the doorframe and thought a moment before answering. 2 little boys and a little girl. One of the boys seems to have the Whirlpool clan's blood, hair like Kushina's. Jingi couldn't help but twitch the corner of his mouth. The course of the war and the timelines had shifted, yet Jiraiya still ended up with Konan's trio. What Jingi didn't know was that it wasn't the Akatsuki kids who went looking for Jiraiya in this version of events. The three had been traveling together, and while searching for food, ran into rogue sand ninjas. By chance, Jiraiya rescued them. Konan, perceptive and practical, realized Jiraiya was a kind man and quietly led Nagato and Yahiko to stay with him. Even if Jiraiya had tried to shake them off, they'd continue to follow. Out of options, Jiraiya took them in. Konan had gently exploited his soft spot because otherwise they'd have starved. Handing the body examinations to others, Jingi and Orochimaru headed to the command center. "Has Jiraiya's squad returned?" Jingi asked Shikaku, who was still busy. Shikaku cursed under his breath. "The squad's back, but that idiot Jiraiya isn't. He said he wanted to take care of those 3 kids. I don't know what's gotten into him." Chapter 123, Victory is in hand, but all the glory belongs to Shizuka. After the war, he even stayed behind to care for 3 homeless orphans. Only Jiraiya would do something like that. Once that good-hearted streak kicked in, not even 10 oxen could pull him back. Forget the village, forget his other students. For now, he would set everything aside. Don't worry about him. Let him be. Once the whole squad returns, we'll head back to the village, someone said. Jingi had had enough of this pervert's antics. With the war over, there was no reason to linger any longer in the miserable land of rain. As for Jiraiya, all they could do was let him follow his whims. Once that man made up his mind, not even 10 oxen could stop him. He even insisted Nagato was some kind of savior. Every promising kid he met became a potential messiah. Mount Myobaku's toads had really worked their brainwashing magic. It was rich irony that the savior he'd raised would later bring ruin to the village he'd fought for. A real-life farmer and the snake. "Orochimaru, can you take charge of the bodies in the morgue?" Nara Shikaku asked. "Of course," Orochimaru replied with a smile. Fortunately, Shikaku only wanted him to handle the enemy casualties and not their own people's bodies as well. Otherwise, who knew what Orochimaru might do? If word got out that he'd started experimenting on their dead, both he and Shikaku would be in deep trouble. Back in the medical tent, Jingi told Nawaki, "I've got good news and bad news. Which do you want to hear first?" "Good," Nawaki said after a moment's thought. Jingi snapped his fingers and ruffled Nawaki's hair. "The good news is we're going back to the village. No more suffering in the land of rain. And the bad? Are you sure you want to hear it?" "Fine. Tell me," Nawaki sighed, glancing at Little Yellow Hair, who seemed interested but not overly concerned. "The bad news," Jingi said, "is that your teacher refuses to come back to camp or the village. He saved 3 orphans on the battlefield and plans to stay and look after them. It'll be hard for him to return for at least 2 or 3 years. Nawaki's mouth fell open. He stood there, stunned. He'd graduated from the academy, but hadn't even gotten much instruction from his teacher before the war began. Now this? He's going to stay and adopt 3 kids? For years? Seriously. Want to switch teachers early? Jingi teased, laughing. Little Yellow Hair watched Nawaki with some sympathy. Thank goodness my teacher is reliable, he thought. If it had been Lord Jiraiya, what a mess. The kid had just passed the academy, the war broke out, and now his teacher had decided to adopt a trio and stay behind. Damn it, Jiraiya, you bastard! Nawaki all but cursed, stomping in fury. Jingi laughed. Little Yellow Hair wanted to laugh too, but felt awkward and just scratched his head. No matter how angry Nawaki got, Jiraiya wasn't coming back. He'd made his choice. In a cave in the land of rain, Jiraiya stood at the entrance, looking toward the camp. Konan, still small, ran over and peered out beside him. Yahiko watched with curiosity. Nagato kept his head bowed in silence. Jiraiya-sensei, what are you looking at? Konan asked. Aha, nothing. Are you full? Jiraiya chuckled, a little embarrassed. He knew Nawaki would probably curse him when he heard what he'd done. I'm full, Konan said, patting her belly. Since she'd followed Jiraiya, she'd been happy every day. Enough to eat, decent clothes, and no constant worry about being attacked. Good child, go rest, Jiraiya said, affectionately ruffling her hair. Then he glanced back at Yahiko and Nagato and sighed. I wonder if Nawaki will still consider me his teacher when I get back to the village. Yahiko gave him a bright grin, and though Nagato kept his head down, the corners of his mouth lifted just a little. Seeing the 3 children relieved Jiraiya's worries, he'd made his choice and would stand by it. Time would prove him right. As for Nawaki, he could make it up to him later. Meanwhile, back home, the third Hokage was in a foul mood. With Iwagakure and the Sand upset by the rain campaign, more trouble kept piling on. Sand elite squads had infiltrated the Land of Fire and caused destruction. Then the Sand Village launched a large-scale invasion into the Land of Rivers, sparking a full-blown war between those two nations. The Land of Fire itself was in turmoil, and the daimyo was furious. The Hokage had hoped to draw out the rain conflict and secure a glorious triumph. Instead, Hanzo of the Salamander had staged that night raid on the camp and been decisively slain by Jingi. The victory was won, but the glory didn't belong to the Hokage. It belonged entirely to Jingi. When news from the front reached the village, the third Hokage felt stunned and humiliated. Where had it gone wrong? Why hadn't Hanzo held out a little longer and surrendered on the village's terms? His death had only elevated Jingi, turning him into a celebrated hero. Rumors about Jingi's deeds spread through the village. Every mention of the Land of Rain war conjured images of Jingi slaying the demigod Hanzo, not of the Hokage's leadership. Konoha had suffered setbacks on the battlefield and paid a heavy price. The blame fell on the third Hokage. All the maneuvering, all the sacrifice, and he had nothing to show for it but blame, while the very person he disliked most rose on the wave of victory. The feeling was bitter. Still, with the war in the Land of Rain over, a weight lifted for the villagers. Jingi's reputation shot up overnight. His prestige climbed fast, like a meteor streaking across the sky. Chapter 124. Come on, let's hurt each other. The third Hokage was in a foul mood, and so were the others in the F4, but Tsunade was in a rare good one. F4 wanted to suppress the incident, but they neither dared nor could. Doing something like that in wartime would offend too many people and chill countless hearts. Besides, Tsunade wouldn't allow it, and neither would the daimyo. Once the news reached them, Tsunade immediately reported it to the daimyo's residence to prevent F4 from making things worse. The daimyo, who had been in a terrible mood, brightened considerably when he heard. When Tsunade hinted at her relationship with Jingi, he was positively delighted. "This is one of our own," he said, and promptly sent an envoy to tell Tsunade he would reward Jingi handsomely after the war. With Tsunade and the daimyo involved and the news spreading like wildfire, already reaching across the ninja world, the third Hokage couldn't dampen Jingi's growing prestige. He had to let it stand. Once most of the wounded stabilized, the camp began its return. Jingi led a group of shinobi escorting the injured and some important supplies back to the village, with Nara Shikaku bringing up the rear. "Finally leaving that cursed place," someone muttered. As they crossed into the Land of Fire and moved away from the border, the steady rain disappeared. Sitting in the carriage, Jingi couldn't help but complain, "I think I'll hate rainy days for a while." 2 years, first a year stationed at the Rain Country border camp, then another year of war. Over 700 days surrounded by rain, even in winter. After so long, anyone would be worn thin. Those who'd spent a long time in the Land of Rain had to feel stifled in some way. Orochimaru, riding in the same carriage, looked up at the sky. "It won't be long before it snows. Are you going to the Land of Rivers battlefield soon?" Jingi asked. In the Second Shinobi World War, Orochimaru's most impressive feats had been on that battlefield. "Not yet," Orochimaru smiled faintly. "I need time to make puppets. As for the war, let it drag on. A full-scale conflict won't end quickly, and I need to rest." The third Hokage had urged him to hurry to the Land of Rivers, but Orochimaru refused. He would go eventually, but not now. Don't let his constant smile fool you. He was a hard man to sway. Jiraiya obeyed without complaint. Tsunade followed her own judgment. Orochimaru didn't refuse as bluntly as Tsunade, but he procrastinated, agreeing in principle while making the timing his own choice. The third Hokage had little recourse. Orochimaru had just returned from the Land of Rain and deserved a break. As for Jingi, F4 didn't want to see him back on the front lines or even in battlefield camps. Better for him to stay in the village and behave than risk another incident. After Jingi's meteoric rise, the third Hokage felt threatened. In peacetime, his position might be secure, but wartime allowed anything to happen. Jingi had flown high enough, no higher. "It's time to rest for a while. Senior's been in the limelight a lot lately," Jingi said, smiling and changing the subject to Sakumo Hatake. Hatake had taken a heavy blow on the Land of Rain, but after being reassigned to encircle and annihilate a sand elite squad, he repeatedly earned military merits, killing more than half the infiltrators who made it into the Land of Fire. The title, Konoha White Fang, began to spread. Konoha White Fang suits him, Orochimaru remarked without much interest. He was thinking about other things. But Jingi-kun is more domineering. The reputation of Godslayer is much louder than Konoha White Fang. Several dark lines sprang to Jingi's forehead at that. He had no idea who started shouting that title, but somehow it stuck. He was being called Godslayer in everyone's mouths. He'd killed a demigod, yes, but that didn't mean he wanted to be dubbed Godslayer. It sounded so dramatic, too chunibu. Compared to Godslayer, Konoha Whitefang paled. As the news spread, more people would call him Godslayer, and Jingi felt helpless at the thought of being known by that name. Your title, Konoha Great White Snake, isn't bad either, Orochimaru added. Jingi shot him an annoyed glare. Orochimaru's smile slowly froze. He seemed taken aback by the suggestion of Konoha Great White Snake. Ha ha! Jingi burst out laughing, clutching his stomach. Orochimaru quietly left the carriage, ignoring the jibe. From then on, if anyone called him Konoha Great White Snake, he would pretend not to hear. He refused to accept such a ridiculous title. The moniker had started with Kitsuchi after an Obagakure ambush when Konoha's elite troops had been almost wiped out. Jiraiya was severely injured, Sakumo Hatake fared poorly, and Orochimaru expended an enormous amount of chakra. He'd nearly turned into a huge white snake. Annoyed, Kitsuchi had shouted that out. Orochimaru liked snakes and had his own methods, but that didn't mean he wanted to be known by such an embarrassing name, especially with Konoha attached, which made it sound even stranger. Those who knew him well understood, but strangers might form the wrong impression. By the way, Jingi said, curiosity getting the better of him, how did that happen? Turning into a snake like that? Orochimaru turned his head away, signaling he didn't want to talk about it. He particularly disliked Kitsuchi now. He preferred to leave the subject alone. Let you tease me, Jingi muttered with a grin. Come on, at most we'll hurt each other. Jokes had to be kept in check. Jingi stopped calling Orochimaru Big White Snake, and Orochimaru, in turn, learned not to taunt him with the nickname Godslayer. They were carrying a heavy load of supplies and wounded comrades, so the team moved slowly, 5 full days before they reached Konoha. Along the way, many villages still bore the scars of war. There was no mistaking the handiwork of the Sand Village's raiding squads. The squads infiltrating the Land of Fire were dwindling. After taking heavy losses, the survivors were beginning to pull back in all directions. While the Sand Squads had been able to take advantage of Konoha's slow reaction, once Konoha focused on them, the situation would turn bad for the Sand Village. The third Hokage would not let this go unanswered. A retaliatory strike on the Sand Village, using the same tactics, would be a natural response. Invading the Land of Wind wasn't the problem. Its vast deserts and countless possible approaches made infiltration easy, but that was exactly the issue for Konoha. There were very few targets worth striking. The villages in the Wind Country were spread out and poor. Even if destroyed, they wouldn't produce the kind of blow the daimyo would accept. The Fourth Council, Tsunade, the third Hokage, and the others were unanimous. This could not be ignored. They all wanted retaliation. Even Tsunade didn't argue. As the saying went, push too far and you can expect underhanded measures in return. I agree we have to strike back, Akimichi Torifu said, his round face crumpling into concern. But how? The desert made navigation treacherous. Without good maps, you could get lost before finding a settlement. Sandstorms could arise without warning, enough to force even Sand Village shinobi to retreat. Nature itself could defeat an invading force long before a proper battle could be fought. The third Hokage was eager to answer the insult, but as Hokage, he had to be cautious. We'll plan this, not rush into it, he said. The returning heroes are coming back from the Land of Rain camp. Tsunade, you and Torifu represent the village and go welcome them. Usually the Hokage would greet returning shinobi personally, but the third didn't want to attend. Tsunade understood. He was in a foul mood, and neither he nor Jingi wanted to be trailed by the other at the moment. No problem, she said. By the village gates, a crowd had gathered. "They're back!" the villagers cried as the wounded and exhausted teams approached. "Lord Godslayer! Lord Jingi!" The cheers were loud and unabashed. Some wounded jumped down from the carts to wave, despite their injuries. Others couldn't join in. Jingi found his smile growing stiff. People seemed determined to call him Godslayer forever. He slipped away as soon as they entered the village. After a year of war, the people wanted to celebrate, and he didn't want to be the focus. He found Tsunade at home, sitting with her legs crossed on the sofa, waiting. "The third told me and the fatty to welcome them, but it got too crowded," she said. "I thought you wouldn't want that sort of fuss." "Too much excitement for my taste," Jingi admitted. "I'm filthy. Give me a minute to shower." He dashed to his room, changed, and took a long, hot wash. When he returned, Tsunade sat in the same position, brows slightly knit. He grabbed a bottle of juice from the fridge, sat down beside her, and took a few sips. "Everything okay?" he asked. Tsunade shook her head slightly. "Anbu is fine now. The missing personnel have been reselected and the Anbu structure is under my tighter control. That's settled." She paused. "What worries me is the village itself. The sand village caught us off guard," she went on. "The land of fire has suffered badly. The daimyo is furious. The third and everyone else want to retaliate, but we don't have a good target in the land of wind. The settlements are too few, too spread out, and too poor. Destroying them won't be enough to satisfy the daimyo's need for a response." Jingi choked on his juice. She was exactly right. The Sand Squad's raids could start fires and wreak havoc across the land of fire. Simply taking out a few locations could do real damage. The Wind Country, by contrast, was sparsely populated desert. Any losses there would be small and unlikely to placate the daimyo. "They must be pulling their hair out," Jingi said, unable to help a short laugh. "Well, I'm not any calmer," Tsunade admitted dryly. "The third wants retaliation. I want retaliation. The only question is how." Jingi set his juice down and leaned forward. "Tell me, what's the most valuable thing in the land of wind?" "Water," Tsunade answered at once. "Wrong." Jingi waved a hand. "More specifically, oases. Where there's water, there's an oasis. Oases are the lifeblood of the Wind Country. Food, medicine, everything depends on them." Tsunade's eyes sharpened. "Go on." "Destroy the oases," Jingi said simply. "Send a team of shinobi skilled in fire release and earth release. Burn and collapse the springs. Obliterate the water sources and the surrounding farmland. Take out the production at the root. Food and medicinal supplies would be gone. That hits them where it hurts, their lifeline." It was a cold, effective plan. If the goal was to retaliate in a way the daimyo could see and feel, attacking the water, attacking the oases, would be both direct and devastating. Chapter 126. Is the Hyuga clan trying to take sides? Target the oases, burn everything, wreck the terrain, and cut off the groundwater. That will make the sand village miserable and infuriate the daimyo of the land of wind. "Worse than cutting off their flesh," Tsunade muttered. Even if doing that would cost many innocent lives in the land of wind, Jingi felt no sympathy for his enemies. Innocent or not, the citizens of the land of wind had been spared no mercy by the sand village, just as citizens of the land of fire had suffered. Many people had lost their homes, their belongings, and their families because the sand had been ruthless. If the sand village could be that cold toward the fire country's people, why should he pity the wind countries? He couldn't even pity his own people enough, much less strangers. If Konoha took out some of the oases inside the land of wind, the wind daimyo would be furious. When the war ended and the sand village was defeated, the daimyo would tighten the village's purse strings. With the sand's meager resources, a prolonged stalemate would bleed them dry. Jingi had never seriously considered Konoha losing. Both were among the 5 great shinobi countries, but Konoha's foundation was on a different level. If necessary, Konoha could exhaust the sand village into collapse. "Good suggestion. I'll go find the third Hokage." Tsunade started to rise, then paused and sat back down. What third Hokage was she going to find? He was probably more anxious than she was. Let him stew a little. "How will you arrange things from here? Are you still going back to Konoha Hospital?" she asked. "No way." Jingi flopped onto the sofa, answering lazily. "Going into Konoha Hospital before was a last resort. You don't honestly think I want to be a medical shinobi, do you? I need to rest for a while. After being stuck in that godforsaken place, the land of rain, for 2 years, I need to relax." "You can at least speak properly," Tsunade scolded, playfully slapping him. What was wrong with being a medical ninja? Jingi's plan hadn't really changed. Initially, he had taken a quiet post at Konoha Hospital to avoid clan attention and scrutiny from higher-ups. After the third awakening of his Tenseigan, he'd resign and do something easier and more profitable. The subsequent events had been unexpected, but things were still under control. He certainly wouldn't go back to full-time work at the hospital. At most, he'd be listed like Tsunade, see a few special patients, and make some quick money. Besides, the hospital was currently run by that old woman, Utatane Koharu, and Jingi had no desire to see that deadpan face or take orders from her. "All right, rest for a while. If it doesn't work out, come to the Anbu," Tsunade said without pressing him. "I'm going to see where Nawaki ran off to." "Okay, go ahead. I'll take a walk." They left together and then split up. Jingi wandered the streets alone and eventually found himself outside Ichiraku Ramen. Seeing Tochi still young, tall, and thin, he went inside. "Hello, what would you like?" the young Tochi asked energetically. "One bowl of tonkatsu ramen, extra meat and noodles, and all the side dishes," Jingi ordered. "All right, please wait a moment." Tochi turned and began preparing the order. Jingi sat and waited, idly twirling a kunai. Other businesses, when they succeeded, expanded, yet Ichiraku remained a small shop no matter how busy it got. A few extra customers would have to queue. Jingi thought he should bring little yellow hair to eat ramen here sometime. Both the kid and his son Naruto were loyal regulars. "Boss, one bowl of char-siu ramen." A new customer arrived and Jingi angled to give him room. When the man sat down, Jingi stiffened in surprise. "What a coincidence," he said under his breath. "Young clan head." Hyuga Hiyashi nodded, smoothing his clothes and sitting with a careful, composed manner. He'd been transformed into a cold, poker-faced heir. Once, he'd smiled more often. Now that smile was gone. The two young clan heads, Hyuga Hiyashi and Uchiha Fugaku, were both practiced at looking unreadable. They greeted each other and then settled into an awkward silence. Jingi had no intention of fawning. Hiyashi said nothing at first either. Tochi placed a bowl of ramen and several side dishes on the table. Jingi dug in without ceremony. He wasn't the type to announce that he was about to eat. "I'm sorry about what happened before," Hyuga Hiyashi said suddenly. Jingi almost choked on his noodles. "Sorry?" Was Hayashi here for the ramen or for him? He took another loud slurp and asked bluntly, "Are you here for me?" "Yes," Hayashi answered. He wasn't his future, steady yourself yet. "Father wanted me to apologize on behalf of the clan," Jingi snorted. It was plain the Hyuga had been shaken by the third Hokage's move. They'd lost a main family member, been abandoned by the Hokage's office, and now faced the threat of Tsunade's retaliation. The elders of the main family had been locked in the Anbu prison for a while before being released. That had made them realize neutrality wasn't an option anymore. Sometimes, even if you didn't want to get involved, you got dragged in. "Don't worry about it," Jingi said between bites. "No need for apologies. Just don't give me more trouble, and I'll be happy." Hiyashi's face tightened, but he persisted. "The clan sincerely apologizes. If you need it, the clan can offer sufficient compensation." "Is the Hyuga clan trying to take sides?" Jingi wondered. He didn't answer, just kept eating. Hiyashi, by contrast, ate with stiff precision, measuring his motions. The apology seemed genuine. After all, Hiyashi had come in person. The main family elders' outrage at the third Hokage and Tsunade's pressures had left the clan shaken. They now realized that staying neutral might no longer be possible. Chapter 127. Rope Tree. "Sis, why don't you hit her?" The third Hokage had badly weakened the Hyuga clan, and Tsunade was poised to strike back at any moment. What stung the Hyuga even more was that they had deeply offended Jingi. The clan began to consider attaching themselves to a powerful ally, but the idea never sat easy with them. Jingi had already killed Hanzo the Salamander in decisive fashion and earned the whispered title, God Slayer. The Hyuga grew even more nervous. Their position became painfully awkward, torn between two dangerous options. Allying with the third Hokage risked handing themselves over to someone who might exploit them again. Aligning with Tsunade was no guarantee either. Tsunade might not care to accept them. Finally, After the shock of Hanzo's death, the clan held an anxious family meeting and resolved to seek an ally. They wanted someone who wouldn't readily take advantage of them. Tsunade seemed the best choice, but Tsunade had to accept them, and an apology required sincerity. The elders of the main house couldn't bring themselves to make such a humble gesture, and the branch house elders lacked the authority. So the task fell to Hyuga Hiyashi, the young clan head. "Aren't the clan elders afraid I'll side with Tsunade and sell out the clan?" Hiyashi asked when he met Jingi. Jingi finished his noodles, lifted the bowl to his lips to drain the soup, and set it down. He was full. Ichiraku ramen always tasted good back in the village. He wiped his mouth and smiled faintly. "Tsunade Hime isn't that sort of person, and I believe you're not either," Hiyashi said, turning slightly. "You may resent the clan, but you've never sought us out to make trouble." "You're very confident," Jingi replied, amused. He put some money on the table and tapped it, then met Hiyashi's gaze. "It depends on how sincere you are. And by the way, that caged bird curse mark of yours? Useless to me. Don't cling to illusions, because I won't show mercy." Calling the caged bird curse mark a dog leash in front of the clan head was bold, and Hiyashi's face flickered. Years of strict upbringing kept his expression rigid, but there was an undeniable tremor to it. "I will relay everything honestly to my father," he said at last. Jingi had had enough of the main house's stiff formality. He waved a hand, stood up, and left. Talking to those people always left him with a headache. Among the main house members he'd met, only one had been different. Hyuga Mi, a quiet, shy girl who might have been a twin to the future Hinata. She was the only one who hadn't felt mechanically cold. Back in the village, Jingi slipped away and didn't join the victory celebrations. He was glad to be home. Ichiraku ramen, a familiar sofa, the hum of the streets. As soon as he reached the house, Tsunade's voice wafted out from inside, scolding someone vigorously. It was Nawaki, the hapless boy who always seemed to be in trouble. Jingi ducked into the doorway just in time to see Tsunade dragging Nawaki by the ear. Nawaki shot a pleading look at Jingi, but Jingi ignored him. If Tsunade was angry, not even he wanted to get involved. Nawaki lowered his eyes and accepted his sister's affection. Jingi sank onto the couch, took an apple from the bowl on the table, and watched with a smirk. Nawaki's protests only made Tsunade firmer. "Granny warned you. Did you not listen? What are you glaring at with those big eyes?" I didn't. Nawaki wailed, clutching his forehead as Tsunade's hand landed. Jingi couldn't help laughing. Kids like this were good for the heart, simple, loud, and endlessly entertaining. He had been brooding earlier about his sensei, but the village had a way of easing him back into himself. Before he could savor the moment long, the door burst open, and Kushina came in, dragging a friend behind her. She saw Jingi, squealed, and launched herself into his arms while Nawaki was still being re-educated on the floor, completely ignored. "Slow down. Don't fall," Jingi said, catching her. Jingi, you're finally back. It was so boring here without you. You're so mean, taking Nawaki and Little Yellow Hair with you." She puffed up, then launched into a litany of complaints. "Tsunade ni never has time for me. She even messed up checking my homework, checked it wrong on purpose. And her cooking is awful. She can't cook at all." Tsunade, standing nearby, flushed with embarrassment. Nawaki, from the floor, was inwardly screaming, "Hit her! Hit her like you hit me!" But Tsunade, though clearly annoyed, had no intention of striking Kushina. "Kushina, don't be ridiculous," Tsunade snapped. "Those textbook questions are weird. That's not my fault. I haven't seen half of those problems before." Besides, Jingi added with a wry smile, "Her cooking's not great, but do you expect her to cook every meal? She's busy all day, being guardian, doing chores, and trying to keep this house from falling apart. That's a lot." Kushina threw herself free of Jingi's arms, put her hands on her hips, and huffed. "Tsunade ni didn't even try, and she checked my math wrong. How could she make that mistake?" Tsunade's face turned a deeper shade of red. "I wanted someone to taste my food, honestly. And as for homework, who's to say the teacher isn't the one at fault here?" Kushina gave a helpless sigh. "Sensei said anyone who's read up to 3rd grade would understand that." "What?" Tsunade's expression exploded. Which sensei had said that? Her chest tightened with anger. "I'll be having a word with him tomorrow." Jingi burst out laughing and collapsed onto the sofa. That jab had hit Tsunade where it hurt. Back when she was young, she'd been like Jiraiya, a student who hated studying. Her grades had been acceptable, certainly better than Jiraiya's abysmal ones, but they couldn't hold a candle to Orochimaru, the prodigy. All three of them had graduated early, starting school before 5 and finishing by 6. If you counted by today's grade levels, they'd barely finished second grade before they'd already become ninja. So the third grade taunt stung Tsunade to the core. "You brat. Granny's done with you." Tsunade clutched her chest theatrically. The blow felt crushing. After all she'd done for them, even taking the blame sometimes. Was this how they repaid her? Humph, humph. As long as Jingi takes care of me, it's fine. Kushina wasn't the least bit intimidated by Tsunade's threat. Tsunade's words weren't meant to be taken seriously anyway. Tsunade, suddenly reconsidering her life choices, flopped down on the sofa. She'd lost the will to lecture Nawaki. Kushina, meanwhile, decided she'd take the matter up with her homeroom teacher tomorrow. And when the holidays came, the teacher could pile on extra homework. "Tsunade-senpai, Jingi-senpai," came a gentle voice. Uchiha Mikoto, who'd come with Kushina, found the right moment to greet them. "Oh, Mikoto, welcome." Tsunade's attitude toward Mikoto was warm. She had no Uchiha prejudice, and besides, Mikoto was utterly likable, beautiful, kind, obedient, sensible, pleasant-spoken, and an excellent cook. What man wouldn't like someone like that? "Hello," Jingi replied with a smile. He noticed, though, that Mikoto was looking at him differently than before. There was a brightness in her eyes, a mixture of excitement and admiration. Did she have a crush? Kushina, curling up in his arms again, answered for them. "Jingi, you're amazing. Do you know everyone's calling you Godslayer now? Lots of kids in my class adore you. Even the teacher said you're one of the village's rare, strong ninja. So you admire me, then?" Jingi laughed, pinching Kushina's small nose. The title Godslayer had stuck fast. It was used all over the ninja world. If everyone insisted, what could he do? It was like the Sannin title in the original story. Unwanted at first, then accepted. Better that than something like Konoha Great White Snake, which only made him laugh at the thought. Orochimaru would probably want to skin Kitsuchi alive over that one. Of course. Kushina laughed through the pinch. "I really admire you, Jingi, and Mikoto ni admires you too." "Really?" Jingi glanced at Mikoto. She hadn't expected Kushina to mention it, and her face flushed. She nodded shyly, letting out a soft, Kushina hadn't seen them for almost a year, and seemed to have an endless stream of things to say. She chatted non-stop, tucked into Jingi's arms, until her stomach rumbled. The little girl pouted. "Jingi, I'm hungry." "You've got to be kidding me," he thought. "I just came back from the battlefield, haven't even had time to rest, and now I'm expected to cook?" But when Kushina widened her big, watery eyes, Jingi couldn't refuse. She'd clearly been traumatized by Tsunade's cooking before. "All right, I'll make something. Rest a bit. Spend time with your friend." "Don't leave Mikoto alone," he said, picking Kushina up and setting her gently on the sofa. "I'm fine." Mikoto sat beside them, smiling softly. "Mikoto ni is the best. She'd never get angry about something so small," Kushina declared, clasping her hands. If only this child could be half as calm and sensible as Mikoto, Tsunade would have far fewer worries. Tsunade sighed helplessly. Mikoto, apart from being an Uchiha, was exactly the kind of universally adored daughter from another family everyone loved. In the kitchen, Jingi opened the fridge, glanced at the vegetables, and quickly whipped up some home-style dishes. "Eat slowly. I'm going upstairs to rest first. Between the march and guarding against enemies, I'm exhausted." As the leader of the first team to come back, Jingi had shouldered the most pressure. After days of exertion, he felt as if his body were falling apart. Go on, Tsunade said idly, still squabbling with Kushina over the meat. Kushina and Nawaki were too busy dealing with Tsunade to react to anything else. Only Mikoto ate quietly, almost soundlessly. "How old are you? Still fighting children for meat?" Jingi thought. He suspected Tsunade really craved it, not trying to annoy Kushina on purpose. Maybe Kushina had been sneaking extra food, who knew? Back in his room, Jingi changed into pajamas and fell asleep immediately. Hyuga main family, clan head's compound. Hiyashi knelt precisely on the tatami, facing his father and the clan elders, and spoke in a measured tone. "Father, Hyuga Jingi accepted my apology. He said, however, that if the clan plans to take sides, it must show sufficient sincerity. The patriarch's face was grim. It wasn't surprising. Someone from the main family had died at Jingi's hands, and the clan had no straightforward way to retaliate or demand satisfaction. The fact that they must maintain a civil front while grieving made the situation bitter. The clan's restraint over seeking retribution is already a sign of sincerity, one elder said, voice tight. Hiyashi listened and then replied quietly, I understand everyone's displeasure, but remember what happened before. The village isn't necessarily on our side, and Hyuga Jingi appears to have found a way to nullify the caged bird curse mark. That's a very serious development. The caged bird curse mark had long been the main family's tool for keeping the branch family in line. If something had changed, if the mark could be nullified, then the main family's control could be at risk. No one wanted Jingi's situation to become common among the branch. The most important thing is to find out why Hyuga Jingi is not affected by the curse mark, another elder said. What if he's lying? Someone else muttered. Don't forget, if the branch family prepares in advance, they might no longer be helpless if conflict turns deadly, another added, voice low with concern. The room filled with urgent, overlapping voices. The clan's leadership heard them all patiently, and when the discussion died down, the patriarch turned to Hiyashi. Hiyashi, he said, you have been in contact with him. Tell us what you think. Chapter 129, Orochimaru rejects the third Hokage. The head of the Hyuga clan was no longer young, and the question of raising an heir had moved to the forefront. The main house had already begun promoting the young successor. Father, elders, I don't think Jingi is lying, one voice said. Hiyashi Hyuga was silent for a moment before speaking. He gives me the impression of someone without fear. He doesn't seem to value our threats. I think even if I or the elders went ourselves, the result would be the same. Why was Jingi so fearless? It was a troubling thought. Lies are eventually exposed, and if Jingi were deceiving them and truly became a godslayer, the main house could still seize the chance to control him with the caged bird curse seal. Then why not try? One elder suggested. A secret strike against Jingi. If successful, it could solve everything. Hiyashi's voice turned cold. Attacking a shinobi from our own village, if discovered, is a death sentence. Who among us would volunteer for that? If it had been an ordinary person, no one would dare. But Jingi was different. He had already killed before, and he had returned with honor. Anyone caught trying to harm him would be executed without any chance to protest. The elder who had proposed the plan fell silent immediately. This was literally a life-or-death gamble. If it worked, there was little to gain, and they would still have to face Tsunade's wrath. If it failed, death would be instant. After a life of relative security, who in the main house would throw it away? Even the elder whose son had died would not risk his own life. He had lost a son, but he himself was still alive. Who would choose death when they could live? Seeing the elders fall silent, Hiyashi could not help feeling disappointed. We'll discuss this later. Aren't Mihui and Kushina close? Let Mihui approach the family as an envoy and show proper sincerity. Showing sincere intent would not be easy. Ordinary gestures wouldn't move Jingi. When Jingi had been at the frontline camp, he had been in charge of medical affairs. By protocol, he should have reported his work to the third Hokage upon returning to the village. But the third Hokage had been unwilling to see him, and Jingi was not eager to meet the Hokage's disapproving face. He had written his report and given it to Tsunade, asking her to deliver it to the Hokage office, and then he started his vacation. Jingi was on leave, and the other members of the F4 hoped he would stay and rest in the village. Orochimaru, meanwhile, wanted time off too, but the third Hokage was not pleased. The village was at a tense moment, and as a member of the village and one of the rising generation of powerful shinobi, Orochimaru could hardly take a break. Could someone of his age afford to rest? No matter how he declined, the third Hokage sent people to press him again and again. In the end, Orochimaru had no choice but to go to the Hokage office. Orochimaru, the village needs you, the third Hokage said bluntly as the meeting began. The smile on Orochimaru's face faded. Teacher, I just returned from the Land of Rain battlefield. I need some time to recover, Orochimaru replied. But the village needs you. The Hokage's tone deepened. The front line is under pressure. The village needs strong shinobi like you to help relieve it. Orochimaru's personality made it clear that the third Hokage could not simply order him around. He had to be appealed to emotionally. Pushed too hard and he would resist. Orochimaru studied the anxious Hokage, remained quiet a moment, and then smiled. Teacher, as far as I know, the pressure at the front isn't as dire as you make it out to be. Besides, I have many matters to attend to. If you insist, call Jiraiya back. I'll go to the land of rivers with him. The retort, neither conciliatory nor confrontational, left the third Hokage momentarily speechless. He had his grievances about Jiraiya. Jiraiya could be stubborn and impossible to pin down, but he had no idea where Jiraiya was to summon him. How could he send for someone he couldn't even find? If you can call Jiraiya back, then I will go with him. If you can't, then we will talk after my vacation. With that, and seeing the Hokage offer no immediate reply, Orochimaru smiled and left the office. Sighing, the third Hokage slumped back in his chair. He couldn't understand why Jiraiya was hiding in the land of rain caring for a few war orphans while the village was at war. Jiraiya was gone. Tsunade was acting as the village leader, and now Orochimaru wanted a vacation instead of going straight to the battlefield. It was infuriating. Leaving the Hokage building, Orochimaru ran into Tsunade. She stopped when she saw him. "The third Hokage was looking for you?" she asked. "Yes, he wants me at the battlefield right away. I refused," Orochimaru answered with a smile. Tsunade gave him a thumbs up. "Good for you. I won't hold you. I'm taking Jingi's report to the third Hokage. That man and the Hokage are not on good terms right now." She waved the report folder and headed into the Hokage building. Orochimaru watched her go, his gaze lingering until she disappeared inside. He thought to himself, Jingi had obtained both a poisonous salamander fish and the corpse of a demigod. He must need help animating puppets. Orochimaru's interest in puppet making deepened. He did not want to work for free, nor did he necessarily intend to pay a fortune, but he wanted to learn what was so unusual about Jingi's chakra. He couldn't openly ask to study it. That would surely be refused. So he planned a subtler approach, offer to help with the puppet construction, be present during the process, and demand only that Jingi animate the puppets in front of him. Never underestimate the persistence of a researcher. Once curiosity becomes obsession, it can even frighten its owner. Beyond puppets and Jingi's chakra, Orochimaru had another target of interest: Sage Mode. Chapter 130. You realize you were wrong now? What were you doing before? Jiraiya's attempt at learning Sage Mode had left him only half competent, something Orochimaru hadn't paid much attention to. Jingi, however, had mastered Sage Mode perfectly, and that naturally caught Orochimaru's interest. Lately, he'd been thinking about whether he should go to Ryuchi Cave to learn as well. Third Hokage, this is Jingi's report. It's all about the medical room. For the rest, we'll have to wait for Senior Deerheart to return. Tsunade walked into the Hokage's office and casually set the report on the desk. The third Hokage let out a heavy sigh, opened the file, and read it carefully. "Tsunade, do you think I made a mistake?" he asked. Tsunade blinked. "In what regard? Jingi or Orochimaru? If it's about Jingi, then yes, it was stupid, but that ship has sailed. As for Orochimaru, I won't say much. If you want him to go to the battlefield, you'll have to convince him yourself." Tsunade didn't want to take on that thankless task. She didn't think Orochimaru had done anything wrong. He'd just come back from the Land of Rain battlefield. Why should he be rushed off to the Land of Rivers battlefield next? He'd been busy all year. Couldn't he rest? The war in the Land of Rivers hadn't escalated enough to require everyone's presence. "The Anbu still has a lot to handle, so I'll go there first. You can read the report yourself," she said, brushing him off. She left without wanting to discuss it further. The village elders had provoked the situation, and now were wringing their hands about it. What had they been doing before? Even Jingi, who held grudges, wouldn't easily forgive the third Hokage for this. Tsunade had an inkling of why the third Hokage was asking about sending Orochimaru. It wasn't that he simply didn't want Orochimaru to take time off. The real worry was that Orochimaru and Jingi were too close. That in itself wasn't a problem, but the elders were trying every trick to get at Jingi's puppets and their core secrets. Orochimaru had some puppets too, and he wasn't willing to hand them over. The third Hokage's push to send Orochimaru to the battlefield made more sense in that light. Tsunade knew it, and Orochimaru knew it, so the third had brought up Jiraiya as pressure. Either go with Jiraiya to the battlefield or take a vacation. Simple as that. After dealing with urgent matters at the Anbu, Tsunade hurried home and told Jingi about Orochimaru. He just shook his head. "That's normal," Jingi said. "Those old men are trying to pry puppets and their secrets out of my hands. Of course they'd try to involve Orochimaru. He has quite a few puppets. It's not like they can ask Orochimaru to hand them over for free," Tsunade added. Orochimaru was in the middle of experiments. You couldn't just strip him of his research materials. Not even his teacher or his own father could easily take those. "This doesn't really concern us. Orochimaru and I have a purely business relationship. He helps me make puppets, and I give him a portion of them as research material." Jingi shrugged. "As long as Orochimaru doesn't break our agreement, fine. He can deal with the elders himself." Business was business. Their relationship wasn't close enough for Jingi to jump in and take the heat for Orochimaru. Besides, Orochimaru wouldn't easily pick sides. Even if he did, Jingi didn't want to stand with him and risk being dragged into the serpent's experiments. "The third Hokage is just dreaming," Tsunade muttered. "Orochimaru isn't as easy to talk to as Jiraiya. I hope their teacher-student bond doesn't sour." "By the way, can you get the Forbidden Technique scroll?" Jingi asked. Tsunade turned, puzzled. "The Forbidden Technique scroll? The one in the Hokage's office? What do you need it for?" "It's not for me. Minato needs it. I have to copy some ninjutsu, especially the Flying Thunder God technique, and a few sealing jutsu." Jingi spread his hands. "With the war, village relations could break down at any time. I'd rather prepare now." Jingi wasn't particularly interested in forbidden techniques himself, but Little Yellow Hair needed them. For Minato's next stage of training, besides continued neural reflex work, sealing jutsu would be essential. The Flying Thunder God technique was for contingency. Nobody could predict what would happen. Better to copy the sealing scrolls now while things were relatively stable. "All right, I'll get it for you tomorrow," Tsunade said. Copying a few sealing jutsu in the Flying Thunder God wasn't something she'd object to, so long as Jingi didn't start dabbling in every forbidden art on the scroll. Even though in theory only the Hokage could examine the forbidden scroll, Tsunade didn't think the third would stop her from copying the techniques. "Wait, what about Nawaki's training?" she snapped. "What about my brother? Damn Jiraiya, when you come back, you'll see how Granny deals with you." "Isn't Nawaki's curriculum already set?" Jingi asked, looking at her. Tsunade bristled. "Swordsmanship and taijutsu as the base, water release as the main focus. I don't ask much of him, just that he masters all of your great-uncle's water release techniques." There was no need to overload Nawaki with everything. Specialization suited him better. Not everyone could become another Tobirama Senju. "I don't expect Nawaki's or Minato's courses to change much in the next 10 years, Jingi continued. "As long as they meet my requirements, what they choose to pursue later is their own business." Jingi had convinced Tsunade. As his older sister, she knew his talent was good for his age, but he still lagged behind the prodigy Minato. The next day, she swaggered into the Hokage's office, produced the Forbidden Technique scroll from a secret compartment, opened it, and began copying with a brush and a sealing scroll. The third Hokage, sitting and reading his documents, couldn't help but ask, "Tsunade, are you planning to learn the ninjutsu on that scroll?" "No," Tsunade answered without looking up. Chapter 131, Tsunade, I asked you to be the boss in the Anbu, not to work. For most people, getting hold of a Forbidden Technique scroll would be nearly impossible. Even to study the ninjutsu inside, you'd have to trade a massive amount of battle merits and get permission from the third Hokage and the elders. Tsunade, however, wasn't bound by those rules. She could inspect the scrolls openly whenever she wanted, and she could copy techniques in front of anyone. The third Hokage sat there with the scrolls in his hands, but couldn't keep his eyes off the sealing scroll that Tsunade held. He breathed quietly with relief when he realized she was only copying the sealing scroll and the Flying Thunder God technique. At least it wasn't a true forbidden art. Still, why was Tsunade copying those particular techniques? She didn't have the aptitude for the Flying Thunder God technique. If she lacked the talent but was copying the sealing scroll, then who was she copying it for? It had to be for Jingi. The thought made the third Hokage's face darken, but there was nothing he could do. He could block others, but he couldn't stop Tsunade. Third Hokage, you carry on with your work. I'm leaving, Tsunade said after she finished copying the scrolls. She put the forbidden scroll case back where it belonged, waved once, and walked out of the Hokage's office, leaving the third filled with uneasy suspicion. Tsunade handed the sealing scroll to Jingi. He took it immediately. Right now, Little Yellow Hair could only take in the basics of the sealing scroll. Anything more advanced was beyond him at this stage. It would be years before his foundation was solid enough. For the time being, Jingi's job was to make sure that foundation got solid. These next few years were the most crucial growth period for Nawaki and Little Yellow Hair. Meanwhile, the legend of Jingi the God Slayer spread through the ninja world. The story that Hanzo of the Salamander had launched a night raid on Konoha's camp and been decisively defeated, killed even, shocked people. Hanzo's reputation as a demigod-like figure was widespread. That he could be killed, and worse, killed by a medical nin, made many mutter in disbelief. The intelligence reports circulated fast, and many reading Jingi's dossier fell silent, wondering if the data was forged. Back in Konoha, after a long day, Tsunade returned home and found Jingi sprawled idly across the sofa. How long are you going to lie around like that? Was the front camp really that exhausting? She asked. More than you can imagine, Jingi yawned, shifting to a comfier position. During the day, I oversee everything in the hospital, and at night, the slug sage drags me into the Shikotsu forest to learn Sage ninjutsu. Months of that. Do you think I'm not tired? Anyone else might have broken down. The slug sage had a knack for picking the worst possible times. He chose to train Jingi during his busiest stretch. Tsunade felt a strange sympathy. Anyone who had been held taut for so long would slack off when allowed. Here, look at this, she said, dropping 2 sealing scrolls into his lap. Jingi caught them, flipped them open, and a smile tugged at his mouth. Fake data? People were always going to doubt sensational reports. What surprised Jingi was that others doubted the authenticity of his dossier as well. How could a nobody suddenly become important? From the moment he transmigrated to where he was now had only been a little over 2 years. His progress had been remarkable. 2 years ago, he'd been a minor, unknown figure in his clan, then a bloodline illness, then the discovery of a terrifying medical talent, then the impossible chain of events that followed. People are questioning me, and you find that funny? Tsunade asked. It's not the village doubting me, Jingi said lightly. This is outside intelligence. It's amusing to see what they think. Tsunade had expected him to be upset. He was young and could be prickly, but Jingi's amused, easy acceptance eased her mind. She headed to the bathroom and called over her shoulder, Get some rest. You'll be taking a position in the Ambu in 3 days. Jingi nearly choked. What? You're sending me to the Ambu? Do I look like Ambu material? Tsunade paused in the doorway to the bathroom, turned slightly, and shook her head with a wry look. You don't, no, but you won't be joining as a regular Ambu. You're going in to lead them. Jingi froze on the couch. Whether he looked like Anbu material was secondary. Being appointed to lead the Anbu was another matter entirely. The realization hit him like a cold breeze. Tsunade was planning to leave the village. You're leaving the village? He called. From the bathroom, Tsunade replied as she splashed water on her face, her tone tired but practical. Of course. Do you want me sent to the river country battlefield? I'm a Konoha shinobi. It's normal to serve during wartime. Besides, the front needs me. If I'm on that battlefield, the Sand Village's puppet corps get cut in half. If this were a war with another village, medical nin like Tsunade and Jingi would have less room to maneuver. But against the sand, a pair of top medical nin could cripple puppet units and change the balance. Can't we talk about this? Jingi pleaded, rubbing his face. The Ambu was a good place for influence, but it was also a swamp of paperwork, responsibilities, and endless mess that could keep someone spinning. He'd been coasting for too long to be dropped into that. Chapter 132. What's the difference between this and being a director? While matters in other departments could be delayed or neglected, Anbu affairs generally required immediate attention, or things would go wrong. There's no room for discussion. Either you go or I go. It's that simple. Tsunade leaned against the doorframe and looked at Jingi calmly. She hoped he would understand how difficult this was for her. How about, I go? Jingi paused. Rather than staying in the village and occasionally having to go to the Hokage office building to face the ugly mugs of the F4, he might as well go to the battlefield. Besides, once Tsunade left, who knew what disgusting schemes the third Hokage and the others might cook up? Forget it. Tsunade opened the refrigerator, grabbed a bottle of water, took 2 sips, and complained, I've wanted to get out for a long time. There are endless things for me to do all day, and my brain is about to explode. If something happens while I'm out, I have to communicate with you first. It's better if I leave and you stay in the village to handle everything directly. Besides, she continued, my temperament isn't suited to taking care of children. One Kushina was enough, and now there are those 2 boys, Nawaki and Minato. I can't keep an eye on all of them. Aren't you afraid that as soon as you leave, I'll clash with those old men? Jingi asked, speechless. Tsunade waved a hand. What is there to be afraid of? If they provoke you, just hit back. As long as you don't betray the village or go around killing people indiscriminately, we'll be justified. Besides, the third Hokage and the others are already stretched thin. Whether they can even get to you is another question. She wasn't overly worried. She believed Jingi could handle it. Besides, the full-scale war had already started, and there were countless trivial matters. If the third Hokage and the council still had the energy to make trouble, Tsunade would be impressed. All right, you call the shots. Jingi yawned and started upstairs. Where are you going? To sleep. There are only 3 days left of the holiday. What else do you expect me to do? No, if you're going to sleep, why are you dragging me along? The idle hours slipped by. Jingi followed Tsunade to Anbu headquarters. It was his first time there. Under Tsunade's orders, all Anbu members who were in the village had returned to headquarters. The building wasn't far from the Hokage office. After all, when Anbu was established, it was directly under the Hokage. No one expected that one day the third Hokage would swap interests and hand Anbu to someone else. Commander! In the main hall of headquarters, a crowd had formed. Since they were back at base, the Anbu members were not wearing their masks. Tsunade nodded and raised her voice. Most of you know the person beside me. Starting today, he'll serve as Anbu's deputy commander. While I am away from the village, he'll be fully in charge of all Anbu matters. Deputy commander? With Tsunade about to leave the village, what was the difference between that and being the commander? Was this really a promotion? Many wore surprised expressions. Tsunade continued icily. I know some of you aren't convinced, but don't forget your duties. Anbu appointments were decided by me. If you're unhappy, you can come to me. Of course, you can go directly to Jingi, but I remind you, he's not as easy to talk to as I am. It was a joke, but the point was clear. Unconvinced? Go see the commander and get scolded. Still not satisfied? Go see the deputy and get beaten. The tale of the Godslayer still circulated around the village. If this had happened earlier, Tsunade's appointment of Jingi as deputy commander would have caused an uproar. Now it was different. Jingi had entered Anbu with achievements and glory that made ordinary people hard-pressed to compare. Even if he directly sat down as deputy commander, at most a few would feel uncomfortable. The induction went smoothly. After introductions, Tsunade led Jingi to the office area. Anbu members must turn in their equipment after each mission and retrieve it before the next. You need to remember that. They stopped in front of a wall covered with masks. Tsunade gestured for Jingi to pick one. He scanned the dense array and couldn't help asking, do I have to choose one of these? They were all animal faces, cats, dogs, pigs, monkeys. Who designed these things? The high-rank masks were even stranger, a white monkey face that looked more like a clown. Tsunade instantly understood his complaint. I'm showing you these to indicate Anbu ranks, not so you can pick a fashion mask. Each mask has a number printed on it. That number corresponds to the code name of an Anbu member. You need to memorize them all. Waving him along, Tsunade led him into the office. Anbu was established back during the second Hokage's time. Originally, it handled special assassination missions, but as time went on, its authority grew and its duties expanded, from assassination to guarding, protection, and intelligence gathering. Anbu can intervene in all sorts of areas. After I leave, you need to keep an eye on those two old men from the Elder Council. They're always complaining that Anbu's power is too great and that it infringes on other departments. Before Anbu was under Tsunade, no one objected to its authority. It seemed appropriate. But after the shift, dissatisfaction rose and people began to grumble that Anbu had become too powerful. Of course, the third Hokage's shadow is definitely in this. There are things he can't openly do, so he needs the Elder Council to step in. Danzo Shimura would have been the obvious candidate to push that line, but unfortunately, he's in prison. Inside the office, Tsunade slapped thick folders onto the desk. These are the files of all Anbu members. Learn them, memorize them, know the intelligence on every operative. This is very important. The middle folders are Anbu's daily cases. Review them one by one and process them quickly. The files and sealing scrolls in the back contain intelligence gathered from multiple sources. Those need organizing too. Sitting in this office comes with heavy responsibilities. Jingi stared at the table piled with files and sealing scrolls. His eyelids twitched a couple of times. He finally understood why Tsunade wanted to get out to the battlefield. Paperwork like this required patience she simply didn't have. Other departments could delegate, but Anbu's duties could not be handed off without chaos ensuing. Cough, cough. Jingi cleared his throat and said seriously, "Can we switch? I'm suddenly thinking being on the battlefield isn't so bad." Tsunade shot him a look that made it clear he had better interpret that however he liked. Chapter 133. F4 is ready to move again. I've put up with village life for so long. It's not every day you get a chance to go out and see the world. You still want to steal my job? Ugh. Jingi muttered as Tsunade shoved him into a chair. He flipped through the file idly, then his eye twitched. Why even do reports for something like tailing a suspect? Why do those have to go to the office? Tsunade leaned against the desk and answered matter-of-factly, "To prevent abuse of power. Anbu wields a lot of authority. If it isn't kept in check, someone could exploit that and cause real trouble." Jingi was silent for a moment. She had a point. Anbu was a special organization. Its authority was enormous and couldn't simply be stripped away without consequences. Remove too many privileges, and it would become nothing more than a second police force. With great power, the only realistic option was tight control over how it was executed. "Fine, I'll read it," he said at last, "but you have to help me transfer Shikaku-sensei to assist me." "That old man Nara Shikaku isn't retiring, is he?" Jingi continued. "I pulled my weight at the camp. Now that I'm back in the village, I expect you to help me out." "All right," Tsunade agreed. She could help with that. Jingi needed to familiarize himself with the roster fast. It would be awkward if the head of Anbu didn't know his subordinates' backgrounds. Fortunately, the Anbu complement was small enough to learn, and the war had thinned their ranks, which paradoxically reduced the immediate burden while creating the challenge of filling vacancies. Anbu had always been the most mysterious, most sought-after division. The annual pile of applications was huge. There was no rush to recruit, but getting a firm hand on Anbu's operations was the priority. In the Hokage's office, the F4 sat together. Third Hokage Hiruzen leaned back and reported, "Hyuga Jingi resigned from Konoha Hospital and has been brought into Anbu by Tsunade. He's serving directly as deputy director. Tsunade will soon leave the village and head to the battlefield." Utatane Koharu brightened. "Hiruzen, once Tsunade leaves, can't we?" "No," Homura Mitokado interrupted sharply. "We can't touch Anbu's privileges, especially in wartime." The importance of Anbu was obvious. Even if they wanted to reduce some of its authority, now was not the time. Weakening it would only diminish the village's strength. The third Hokage's face was grave. "Koharu, Homura is right. During the war, we mustn't do anything that weakens our own power. Anbu's issues can be dealt with after the war." Koharu's expression soured. "Then why call us here?" she asked. "Not allowed this, not allowed that. What's the point?" Hiruzen gave them a hint. Their strength was still insufficient. What he meant was manpower. They needed helpers. Danzo? Koharu and Homura realized in the same instant. Hiruzen hadn't summoned them to strip Anbu of authority while Tsunade was away. He was considering bringing Danzo Shimura out into the open. With Tsunade present, they couldn't move against her, and Hiruzen didn't want a direct conflict. But once she left for the battlefield, options opened. Compared with Tsunade, Jingi would be less unyielding. Danzo was the sort who would bite anyone, a useful tool, and a convenient scapegoat. With him active, the F4 could operate more freely and blame him if things went wrong. A good scapegoat, why not use him? Koharu hesitated, lips moving as if she wanted to speak, then fell silent. She feared Danzo's release might provoke Tsunade. Homura sighed. More than Tsunade, we should be worried about Hyuga Jingi's reaction. Koharu scoffed. Even without Tsunade here, does Jingi dare to make trouble with us? Hiruzen shook his head at Koharu's incredulity. Do not underestimate him. Hyuga Jingi is no longer the minor figure he once was. Besides, when Tsunade leaves, Anbu will be in his hands. But some things must be tested, Koharu muttered. After leaving the Hokage's office, Koharu finally asked outright, You don't agree with releasing Danzo Hiruzen? Or are you worried Tsunade will return from the battlefield? No, Homura frowned. Tsunade understands us, and we understand Tsunade. She's not the type to shirk her duty and flee. She's deeply devoted to the village, which is why she volunteered to go to the front. My concern is Jingi. He could react very strongly. What kind of strong reaction? He won't directly confront us, will he? Koharu still believed Jingi wouldn't dare. Even if he had authority over Anbu, his rank couldn't compare to theirs. Homura said nothing, only hoping Jingi's response wouldn't be excessive. 3 days after Jingi joined Anbu, Nara Shikaku returned to the village. He had barely finished his duties at the Hokage's office before being summoned to Anbu instead of to his home. When he learned he was expected to join Anbu and assist Jingi in managing it, Shikaku put on an exaggeratedly pained expression. Sensei, Tsunade appealed. Although Jingi's reputation is enough, he's still young. He needs someone of standing to help him run Anbu. I hope you understand. Shikaku, sitting across the desk, grew more irritated the more he thought about it. He had just returned to the village and had no time to rest before being given such a heavy responsibility. He slammed the table and exploded once Tsunade left. Speak up. What exactly are you plotting, you brat? He demanded. Don't give me some nonsense about not being able to manage or not being able to hold the fort. Tell me the truth. Some people weren't cut out for management. Jingi was not one of them. Back at the frontline camp, his ability to organize everything in the medical room, down to the smallest detail, had already demonstrated his competence. Chapter 134, Hatake Sakumo is famous, and the conspiracy begins to show. The idea that he couldn't control the situation was laughable. Jingi had returned to the village with honor and prestige. Who would dare make trouble while he sat in the Anbu office? Hanzo of the Salamander hadn't even been turned into a puppet yet. When the old advisor pressed him, Jingi smiled wryly. Nothing. It's just that there are too many small matters. I wanted someone to help me. You brat. Nara Dear Heart felt his blood pressure spike. You think there are too many small matters, so you drag this old man over to help with your paperwork? Do you really expect me to refuse? Sorry, no, you can't. Are you sure it's only the small stuff? You'll handle the important decisions yourself? Nara Dear Heart didn't mind taking care of minor details. What worried him was Jingi using this as an excuse to dump everything on him. They had worked together long enough for Nara to know Jingi's habits. Once he started delegating, he became impossible to stop. If the head of Anbu pushed everything to the deputy head, then the deputy head pushed it to the head's secretary, Nara himself. He'd lose his mind. Even though Anbu carried great authority, Nara didn't want anything to do with that power. Senior, don't worry. I'll personally take the important matters. I only ask you to handle the small ones. Jingi promised solemnly. He had tricked Nara, but he would not abandon Anbu, nor could he. Nara's expression darkened. Remember your promise. Otherwise, don't blame this old man if I feign illness and go on leave. A little deception was tolerable. Being completely sandbagged was not. Jingi smiled. No problem. Thank you for your hard work, Senior. Then he pushed a stack of documents and sealing scrolls across the table and motioned toward them. Senior, you can start now. Nara Dearheart stared. Could he renege on his promise? A lifetime of hard work, having assisted the third Hokage with countless messy affairs, had brought him to this. conscripted into Anbu to deal with Jingi's administrative pile. Nara was capable and, like many in his clan, intelligent. That was precisely the problem. The capable did more work. As he sat down to the labor, he didn't know Jingi had already set his sights on his son, Nara Shikaku. Once Jingi took over, Anbu and Tsunade left for the front lines. With Nara Deerheart's help, he could leave the organization in Jingi's hands with confidence. Nara's only real concern lay with the Hokage office and the two senior advisors from the Elder Council. With Anbu's daily chores handed to Nara, Jingi suddenly had more free time. 5 days after Tsunade departed, the village was abuzz with news. Thanks to concerted efforts, enemy infiltrators in the Land of Fire had been mostly wiped out. Sakumo Hatake's name was everywhere. He had reportedly killed 2 important figures from the sand, Chiyo's son and daughter-in-law. The unlucky couple had run straight into Sakumo on their retreat. After a fierce fight, both fell to his blade. Jingi opened one of the latest sealing scrolls and glanced at it. "Senior, don't you think something's off about the Sakumo Hatake matter?" "Off?" Nara asked. The news of Sakumo's deeds had spread like wildfire, and Nara, buried in Anbu work, hadn't had much time to follow the reports. Jingi handed the scroll over. As Nara read, his relaxed expression tightened. "You're right. It does feel wrong. The story spread too quickly, too broadly. It looks like someone's pushing it from behind, actively promoting Sakumo Hatake." Killing key enemy figures was the kind of news the village should publicize. They hadn't made a big deal of Jingi's dispatch of Hanzo of the Salamander in the Land of Rain, but here Sakumo's achievements were being praised and broadcast everywhere. Jingi didn't begrudge Sakumo the attention, but the intensity and timing felt deliberate. Overemphasize one name while treating another as routine, and the latter's reputation would be eroded by comparison over time. "Ha ha!" Jingi said, amusement ringing in his voice. "Seems someone doesn't want my prestige to rise too high. They've deliberately shoved Sakumo Hatake forward." He flipped through more sealing scrolls, losing interest as he read. If the third Hokage and his circle were trying to target him, they were doing it with great care. But hadn't they thought about the consequences of elevating Sakumo so much that they couldn't step back? In the original thread of events, Sakumo was raised incredibly high because of this. He was even granted the privilege by the daimyo to wear the Hokage t-shirt, and Sakumo actually wore it. That elevation later fed into a conspiracy against him. Jingi's amusement grew as he imagined how this could backfire. The plan seemed aimed not only at elevating one man to drown out another, but also at driving a wedge between Sakumo and him. Unfortunately for the conspirators, they had miscalculated Sakumo's character. He was straightforward, too straightforward to read hidden motives in the praise, too proud to feel indebted to the Hokage office, and far from likely to pick a fight with Jingi over it. The more they pushed, the more they risked creating a great, independent figure with a samurai spirit who couldn't be controlled. Watching Jingi laugh, Nara Deerheart silently relaxed. His earlier worries had been unnecessary. The silver lining was that Jingi would not become resentful of Sakumo because of the publicity. Their relationship would remain intact. As for the Hokage office, Nara couldn't help but wonder whether those in the office had truly taken the measure of Sakumo Hatake as a man. Chapter 135. Shizuoichi is the best, and I don't accept any rebuttal. If it failed, everything would be for nothing, and in the end, he would only humiliate himself. Shaking his head to clear the tangled thoughts, Nara Shikaku pushed them aside and went back to his work. Jingi, however, hesitated for a moment and decided he might as well prod the third Hokage a little. "Since you want to promote Sakumo Hatake so badly, why not I add some fuel to the fire?" He produced a sealing scroll, quickly wrote his instructions, attached the scroll to the leg of a puppet crow, and released the bird. That kid definitely has ulterior motives, Nara Shikaku thought, glancing at Jingi as he tried to suppress a grin. He dismissed the worry. This wasn't his concern anymore. He and the third Hokage were no longer on the same side. Why bother meddling in the third's affairs? The rumor about Sakumo spread fast. Tsunade, already at the frontline camp, noticed it too and suspected someone was pushing the matter behind the scenes. She didn't intervene directly. She was overworked at the camp and trusted Jingi to handle the political side. Old Granny Chiyo had developed new poisons that were inflicting heavy losses on Konoha. Tsunade was consumed with analyzing them and working on antidotes. The village's political footwork could be delegated to Jingi. Late that night, as Tsunade was about to rest, an intelligence department ninja hurried in and handed her the puppet crow. Camp defenses were strict. The war atmosphere here was denser than at the Land of Rain camp. Summoned animals and messenger hawks couldn't fly about freely. They had to reach designated points and be processed by the intelligence department, or they'd be shot down. The sealing scroll bore Tsunade's name, so they sent both the scroll and the puppet that delivered it. "You've worked hard," she said, taking the scroll. She decoded the seal, opened it, and read. The puppet crow would find its master on its own. She didn't worry about it, but the message puzzled her. "Help promote Sakumo Hatake?" she muttered. The third Hokage seemed to be elevating Sakumo to keep Jingi in check. Why would Jingi ask her to write to the daimyo personally to nominate Sakumo and request a reward? What was he playing at? She closed the scroll, annoyed, and flicked the puppet crow. "Jingi, what exactly are you planning?" After a long pause, the puppet's blue eyes glowed, and Shizune's voice came from it. "Huh. Didn't you say not to use the puppet for contact unless absolutely necessary? What time is it, and you're still lecturing me about rules?" Tsunade snapped, a vein pulsing at her temple. If Jingi were here, she'd punch him. The rule against direct puppet contact was meant to avoid detection and provoking the third Hokage. Rarely used, not forbidden. "Tell me straight. Someone's pushing Sakumo's case, surely the third Hokage. Why make me write to the daimyo to nominate him and ask for a reward?" "Because Sakumo's already a village hero," Jingi said simply. "If he's a hero, you should help nominate him and ask for a reward. The daimyo's response is up to you. Praise him a lot." "You don't think this will affect me?" Tsunade asked. "I don't. My relationship with Sakumo is fine. It won't cause trouble, and the more they praise him, the more uncomfortable those old men will be." That explanation satisfied her. She trusted Jingi's judgment enough to accept it. "Fine. I'll write to the daimyo. I can't promise what reward he'll give, but I'll sing Sakumo's praises." The puppet crow's glow faded. Tsunade wrote the letter, opened a window, and the bird took off. She ordered someone to personally deliver the message to the daimyo's residence. And then she buried herself again in antidotes and poison analysis. That evening at dinner, Nawaki gushed at the table. "Sakumo-senpai is amazing. Everyone outside is saying he's a true village hero." "I want to be a village hero like him when I grow up," another child said, eyes shining. Kushina, hands on her hips, cut in indignantly. Little Yellow Hair, Jingi's ward, lifted a foot to scold Nawaki for bragging, but Kushina stopped him. "Nawaki-ge, Jingi is a village hero too, okay? No sand ninja is as strong as him." "Nah, Jingi's strong, but Sakumo-senpai is amazing too. People say so," Nawaki replied. "I don't care. Jingi is stronger than any senpai," Kushina declared. "You're being unreasonable." "I am unreasonable. Watch out, I might hit you." She balled a tiny fist and assumed a mock fighting stance. With her super strength under control and the Nine-Tails seal stabilized, Kushina's strength had shot up, and even Nawaki kept a wary distance. "Humph, if you're so brave, then don't use your fists," Nawaki complained, though he didn't press his luck. After dinner, Jingi lounged on the sofa, amused by the two kids arguing. Kushina, a few years younger than Nawaki, wasn't lacking in spirit or strength. She tilted back proudly with hands on hips, utterly pleased with herself. Nawaki, on the other hand, was frustrated. He'd managed to stop her from swinging, but he still couldn't win the argument. Little Yellow Hair finished eating with a quiet bow. "Teacher, thank you for the meal," he said politely, then stepped forward. "For what?" Jingi waved him off. "You're welcome to eat here. It's only one extra pair of chopsticks. If you really want to thank me, train hard and get stronger. Oh, and take this." He tossed a small wallet to the boy. Little Yellow Hair felt its weight and looked inside. His eyes shimmered. "I can't take this," he blurted, immediately trying to refuse. Chapter 136. How much isn't important. What matters is that there is. "Take it. Consider it a loan from me. When you're older and can earn money, pay me back then." Jingi said it flatly. A boy should always have some money. What if you go out and want to buy something to eat, or want to go to a hot spring with friends but don't have any? "But No more buts. That's how it is. Facing Jingi's determination, Minato Namikaze reluctantly put the wallet away. The little blonde vowed silently that he would obey his teacher and pay him back properly when he grew up. Ah, why don't I have one? Nawaki's sharp eyes had noticed how thick Minato's wallet looked. He stopped arguing with Kushina, trotted over, and blurted out loudly, "Jingi, I want one too." "Go ask your teacher," Jingi said, pushing Nawaki away with an irritated foot. "Ask my teacher? I don't even know where my teacher is hiding. How can I ask him?" Nawaki's smile froze, and his face grew more aggrieved by the second. Jingi couldn't help muttering, "I give up on you." He handed a wallet to Nawaki as well. "Use it sparingly, and you absolutely cannot buy adult magazines. If you do, I won't give you a single coin next time." Since Minato got pocket money, Nawaki couldn't be left out. That kid liked getting into trouble when he had cash, just like his sister, so he needed some limits. Minato could have a little more, Nawaki a little less. When Nawaki ran out, Minato would look after him anyway. Heh! Almost in tears, Nawaki hugged his wallet and laughed foolishly. "And me?" Kushina pushed forward. The little rich girl wanted pocket money too, and Jingi sighed, half exasperated, half amused. "Here, here, here. You get some too." The amount didn't matter so much as the gesture. Kushina wasn't short on money, but if the boys had pocket money and she didn't, she would be mortified. After getting her share, she tilted her chin at Nawaki as if saying, "Humph, I have mine too, and mine's more than yours." Nawaki's smile vanished. "Teacher, about Sakumo-senpai." Minato's brow creased with worry. He couldn't understand why his teacher's reputation didn't spread the same way. After Jingi killed a strong enemy, word moved slowly, but news about Sakumo-senpai spread like wildfire after he killed an opponent. It couldn't be suppressed, harder to control than an AK. That seemed wrong to the boy. "Kushina," Minato insisted, "in my heart you're a great hero. You're even more amazing than Sakumo-senpai." Kushina snuggled into Jingi's arm and rubbed against him. Jingi squatted and ruffled her hair. "Don't worry, I haven't been affected by this. It's right that Sakumo-senpai becomes famous. As for everything else, you kids shouldn't be worrying about it." Kushina opened her mouth to say more, but an Anbu ninja suddenly appeared in the living room. The Anbu, codenamed Tiger, knelt, bowed his head, and reported, "Sir, the Hokage office has summoned you to a meeting at the Hokage office building. Please go immediately." "Understood. I'll be right there." Since Tsunade wasn't in the village, Jingi had been attending meetings at the Hokage office on behalf of the Anbu. These meetings hadn't involved the Anbu before, but since the Anbu's reorganization, things had changed. "Stay home and be good," Jingi told the three children as he stood, setting Kushina aside. "I'm going to the Hokage office building for a meeting. If you're bored, do your homework or train in the yard. Don't run around, especially you, Kushina." He couldn't fathom how the Cloud had managed to infiltrate the village and abduct Kushina. Letting someone into the village and carrying out a kidnapping was a brilliantly executed operation, and Jingi wondered whether the third Hokage and the others had been helpless. After giving the children instructions, he left for the Hokage office building. "Jingi, over here." In the conference room, Akimichi Torifu waved him to a seat. Jingi sat down beside him without fuss. Torifu nudged him with a grin. "So how's the Anbu? Is it hard to manage?" "Lots to do." "It's fine. I don't handle many of the day-to-day things myself. Dearheart Senpai takes care of most of the miscellaneous stuff. I'm mostly relaxed." Jingi smiled. "Right now I'm mainly responsible for personnel selection, so it's not too busy, but I can't compare to you, senior." "Are you teasing me or laughing at me, kid?" Torifu chuckled. He had been busy before, but lately he had so little to do he picked his toes in meetings. Still, he wouldn't give up the position of Hokage assistant. If he did, the F4 would make sure someone else took over the next day. The post fit him. He disliked trouble and didn't want to manage, and the assistant's role was pleasantly idle now. Torifu only needed to show up occasionally to maintain a presence. At that moment, Jingi noticed two important arrivals. Torifu saw his gaze and explained with a smirk. "What? Dearheart didn't tell you? The heads of the Uchiha and Hyuga clans haven't been well lately, so their younger clan heads have started taking over." "He didn't," Jingi admitted, patting his forehead and resolving to pay more attention to Anbu matters. The Hyuga and Uchiha were two of Konoha's representative clans. The old clan heads' failing health and the young heads taking over signaled many underlying changes. This meant a generational shift, and the Anbu would need to gather and process all the intelligence. Nara Shikaku had thought it wouldn't directly affect the Anbu, and therefore hadn't specially informed Jingi, but Jingi would watch it closely going forward. For the meeting, both Uchiha Fugaku and Hyuga Hiyashi had come to represent their families for the first time. They both looked a little nervous but kept impassive faces. Hyuga Hiyashi scanned the room, then walked over and sat beside Jingi. Uchiha Fugaku hesitated a moment before taking the seat next to Hiyashi. When important meetings were held at the Hokage office, the great clans were required to send representatives because they held seats on the Elder Council, though a seat didn't necessarily mean they could interfere with everything the council did. Jingi paid little attention to his two new neighbors and resumed his light-hearted chat with Torifu. Both men were food lovers, and their conversation quickly turned to cooking. "Really? It tastes even better that way?" Torifu asked. "Definitely. If you don't believe me, come by sometime. My 3 kids love it." "I'll have to try it. I'll invite you to my place one day for my special grilled meat." "If you invite me, I'll certainly come." Listening to the two of them go on about recipes, Hyuga Hiyashi, sitting next to Jingi, couldn't help feeling a little tense. Chapter 137. Want to make medicine without supplying raw materials? Their conversation had been getting louder and more heated when the third Hokage arrived with 2 Hokage advisors. He took the main seat. Utatane Koharu and Homura Mitokado sat casually to his left and right. He scanned the room, cleared his throat, and said, "Since everyone is here, let's begin." "Homura, can the logistics department guarantee the supply of materials?" he asked. "No problem," Homura replied. "What about the medical department?" the third Hokage asked. "The medical department cannot," Utatane Koharu answered, glancing pointedly at Hyuga Jingi. "The pharmaceutical department isn't under the medical system's jurisdiction, so I can't guarantee their drug supply." Akimichi Torifu shot Jingi a cautious look. Jingi merely smiled, unbothered. "It's a mess that the medical system can't even oversee the pharmaceutical department," the chief of the Shimura clan muttered from the back, and instantly every eye turned to Jingi. As an Anbu representative, Jingi technically oversaw the pharmaceutical department. Jingi leaned back in his chair, composed, and met the Shimura chief's glare. "What gives you the right to meddle in the pharmaceutical department's affairs?" he asked flatly. The goateed, graying Shimura chief blinked. "What, has the Shimura clan become so powerful that we interfere with Anbu now?" "Everything you say is right," Jingi said with mock agreement, drawing a stifled laugh from Akimichi Torifu. The Shimura chief's face reddened. No disrespect meant, senior," Akimichi hurried to add, his apology sounding thin. "Don't argue about this during the meeting," the third Hokage snapped, frowning, and turned his attention back to Jingi. "Can the pharmaceutical department supply the drugs we need?" Jingi crossed his legs and shook his head. "I don't know. In a meeting like this, do not joke about the village's fate." Utatane Koharu slammed the table and scolded him angrily. "I really don't know," Jingi said, spreading his hands. "When Tsunade left, she only told me to keep an eye on the pharmaceutical department. How many medicines they can produce and how they will be supplied, that wasn't my concern. If Advisor Koharu is so worried, she can go find Tsunade. Anbu only assists in managing the pharmaceutical department. It hasn't been formally placed under Anbu." On paper, Jingi's statement was defensible. The pharmaceutical department received Anbu assistance rather than being officially absorbed. In practice, though, Anbu personnel filled the department. Those who knew would understand. Those who didn't might assume the department was a military facility. But Jingi refused to admit the de facto control he exercised, and Utatane Koharu exploded. "Do you take Granny for a fool, or do you think you can fool everyone with that?" she demanded, voice trembling with anger. Jingi raised an eyebrow. "So you're not a fool?" he said. "You." Utatane's face went pale with fury. Slamming his hand on the table, Jingi barked, "Don't act like you don't understand. If you don't provide raw materials, how do you expect the pharmaceutical department to make drugs? Are they supposed to research medicine with rocks, or have all the materials been swallowed up by you, by this Elder Council representative, this Hokage advisor? The outburst left some of the younger attendees stunned. Hyuga Hiyashi and Uchiha Fugaku, attending a high-level meeting for the first time, felt their faces go cold. Their elders had told them to sit quietly. Instead, the room erupted in table-thumping arguments and curses. Cough, cough! Homura Mitokado quickly stood to defuse the situation. That's enough. Let's not make fools of ourselves here. Jingi didn't relent. Instead of asking whether the pharmaceutical department can supply drugs, think about how to send them more raw materials, he said. I control the pharmaceutical system. Give me materials, and I'll start production. Don't, and nothing happens. How many people die on the front line? What's it got to do with me? His tone was blunt and chilling. Many around the table looked taken aback. Seeing the debate slipping further out of control, the third Hokage intervened. Koharu, Homura, has the supply of medicinal materials to the pharmaceutical department been interrupted? Recently, material transfers have been large, Utatane answered, somewhat sheepishly. The materials needed by the pharmaceutical department have been prepared but haven't had time to be delivered. Homura fixed Utatane with a hard look. Then send them immediately. War isn't a game. Without enough medical supplies, many will die on the front. The third Hokage turned the page on the subject. Are the ninja tool supplies sufficient? Sufficient, but relying solely on the village isn't enough, someone from logistics replied. We need to procure from outside, but with the war, routes are dangerous. We'll need enough personnel to escort merchant teams and protect shipments from enemy attacks and looting. I'll arrange it, the third Hokage said, nodding. After the initial explosion, the rest of the meeting slid into duller territory. From Jingi's perspective, there wasn't much more to be said. With Konoha's resources, enough material and combat personnel would simply wear down the sand. The two villages' war capacities weren't comparable. As the meeting was about to adjourn, the third Hokage added, Anbu needs to dispatch personnel to protect merchant teams traveling to other countries to procure materials. What merchant teams? Procuring which materials? Jingi asked, frowning. Chapter 138. God, this guy is tougher than Tsunade. It's a merchant caravan responsible for procurement for the village, the third Hokage said vaguely. Jingi paid no mind to the vagueness and cut straight in. I apologize, Hokage-sama. Since the war began, the Anbu have taken heavy losses gathering intelligence and guarding important figures, and we haven't been able to replenish our ranks. I think crucial matters like material procurement should be handled by a proper dispatch of Konoha ninja, not left to merchant caravans. Caravans are unreliable, he went on bluntly. At critical moments, we must rely on our own people. Was he pretending not to know or genuinely ignorant? Akimichi Torifu tugged helplessly at Jingi's sleeve. The merchant caravan in charge of procurement was a joint operation formed by families like the Sarutobi and Shimura. There was the reason they represented the village in purchases. A caravan put together by several ninja families under the village's banner was extremely profitable. Jingi ignored Torifu's pull and kept talking. I don't agree with letting merchant caravans represent the village on vital procurement. The village should send ninja to handle it. As for protection, Anbu are short-staffed and can't cover it. Send Anbu to protect your family's merchant caravan so your families can profit? That idea sat poorly with Torifu. Third Hokage's face hardened, but Jingi didn't back down. No meant no. If they had the ability, they should do the procurement and bear the risk. If they didn't, they shouldn't take the job. They wanted money without peril and still expected Anbu to shield them? The audacity. If this caravan is unreliable, replace it, Jingi continued. Konoha isn't short of resources. We have plenty of clans. If we pick a few shinobi from each clan to form a caravan, they can procure materials, and even potential troublemakers would think twice before interfering. There was nothing wrong with that. The Hyuga, the Uchiha, Inoshikacho, and other clans could easily spare strong personnel. Jingi elaborated. Does the Uchiha lack strong people? No. Hyuga? No. Those two clans could each provide 10 jonin, right? Inoshikacho could manage 10 as well. No problem. Is there a problem? He asked the room. Silence followed. As Jingi's gaze swept the gathered elders, both Hyuga Hiyashi and Uchiha Fugaku wanted to say, no problem. Especially Fugaku. 10, 20 would be no issue. If such a caravan existed, who would dare touch it? The clans that could contribute like that would literally sleep better at night. There was another point. Uchiha, Hyuga, and Ino Shikacho had the depth to supply elite shinobi, but the Shimura and Sarutobi did not. Their clan foundations weren't as deep. Uchiha and Hyuga had been powerful before the village formed. Their wealth and elite ranks far outmatched ordinary clans. When the Sarutobi and Shimura were established in Konoha, they were minor players. Their rise since then owed a lot to Third Hokage's patronage. They'd increased numbers, yes, but not strong individuals overnight. Even though the Sarutobi now had the most shinobi among the clans, against the Uchiha, they would likely be outmatched. "Let's end today's meeting here," the third Hokage said. He didn't want to say more. He'd asked for Anbu to protect the caravan, and now Jingi was bringing up clans like Uchiha and Hyuga. What was he implying? Looking down on Sarutobi and Shimura, Torifu stood, trying for a half-smile. "Grandpa, may I call you that? Please go to the front lines and switch with Tsunade. I'm begging you." Torifu had thought Tsunade was unyielding, but after she went to the front, he'd realized she wasn't nearly as harsh as Jingi. Tsunade had always held back, always giving the third Hokage face. Jingi, by contrast, slammed tables, cursed, undermined, never giving face. Compared to him, Tsunade seemed tame. Torifu's worry was plain. "Senior, don't joke. I can't handle it," Jingi chuckled dismissively. "You can't handle it, and you act like that? You nearly scared me to death," Torifu said, rubbing his chest as if recovering from shock. Jingi spread his hands and said earnestly, "When I was weak, I played the dutiful grandson. Now that I have confidence, if I still play the dutiful grandson, wouldn't I just become one for real?" Torifu wanted to curse at him and laugh at him at the same time. All right, you're not a grandson. Then tell me, what happens if we burn our bridges?" With Jingi's attitude, Torifu truly feared the day the two factions within the Hokage's supporters would come to a head. "Then let them clash. If others won't make things easy for me, why should I put up with it?" Jingi replied coolly. At worst, Konoha would break apart and everyone would go their separate ways. Of course, saying that aloud was dangerous. Anything that didn't help unity couldn't be voiced. Torifu left, shaking his head. Jingi turned to Hyuga Hiyashi, who remained seated. "Is the young clan head busy?" Hiyashi had intended to suggest moving somewhere private to talk, but remembering Jingi's stance during the meeting, he held back and answered, "I would like to represent my clan and discuss compensation." "Then let's talk as we walk," Jingi said, and didn't refuse. As they left the Hokage's office, Jingi called to Uchiha Fugaku, who had just risen to go. "Please give my regards to the old clan head, Fugaku." Fugaku froze, then nodded out of habit, a strange feeling washing over him. Why would Jingi mention the Uchiha head? There was no real connection between them. Was Jingi trying to win the Uchiha over? Fugaku tried to hide his unease, quickened his pace, and left the office. Eyes in the room had changed toward Jingi. It was well known that the Hokage's office and the Elder Council had long been hostile to the Uchiha. Yet Jingi was now openly making gestures toward them. What did it mean? If Tsunade's faction could really win over the Uchiha, the village's balance of power would shift dramatically. The Uchiha were eager for a backer. They'd be willing even to pay to secure one. The targeting of the Uchiha went back to when Senju Tobirama was second Hokage and had only intensified under the third, though it hadn't quite reached the blatant persecution seen after the Ninetales incident. Chapter 139, Hyuga Hiyashi, Why Should I Help You? At that time, the F4 were moving against the Uchiha in secret. Stepping out of the Hokage's office, Hyuga Hiyashi wore a complicated expression. "Lady Tsunade," he asked, "are you trying to win over the Uchiha?" Tsunade shrugged. "Who can say what will happen? I'll only say this. Those we win over might be fine, but those who stay neutral are the ones who will suffer." Jingi stabbed the remark straight into Hiyashi's heart. Didn't the Hyuga prided themselves on neutrality? Jingi smiled coldly. In the current climate of the village, neutrality was no protection. It was a liability. "As for the Uchiha," he continued, eyeing Hayashi, "to be honest, I'd sooner curry favor with the Uchiha than with the Hyuga. I was born into the Hyuga, so I know what the family is like. Any insulting word you can think of, the Hyuga can be tied to it. Winning over the Uchiha brings value. The Hyuga, Especially the main family. Don't. Not to me. Hiyashi faltered. He wanted to object, to defend his clan, but Jingi's words were hard to deny. Neutral parties were always first to be crushed in times like this. As head of the family's young generation, Hiyashi knew the clan's faults intimately. He wanted to change things, but he didn't know where to start. Are the grievances between the main family and the branch family truly irreconcilable? He asked finally, the question that had tormented him for years. Jingi laughed, not unkindly. Young patriarch, you must be kidding. If that's a joke, it's a pretty good one. I'm not joking, Hiyashi said, voice thin. He looked broken. Hisashi's legacy, his brother's fate, had convinced Hiyashi change was necessary, but the mechanics of it, he had no plan. Jingi's laughter cut at him like salt. You really expect me to believe that? Jingi said, rubbing his temple. I came from the branch family, and you ask me if the main and branch can reconcile? That's laughable. The system is unjust from the start. Some people are born into the main family with all the power, and the branch family are branded with the caged bird curse mark. No, they're leashed like dogs, expected to obey the main family. Resist, and the leash tightens. A leash that's too tight can kill, he added, not to mention the humiliation. He gave Hayashi's shoulder a rough pat. If you want change, then think about what really makes this system cruel. The caged bird curse mark does preserve the clan line, but why is it only on the branch family? Why can main family members use a jutsu to control the lives of branch family members? Why should there be an ugly mark on a person's forehead that makes them want to tear it off? If you remove the jutsu that enforces the caged bird curse mark, if the curse is changed so no visible mark appears, what distinction would be left between main and branch? Do you think resentments would survive that? Ask yourself, why must there be a distinction at all? Isn't it ridiculous? The whole legacy argument, protecting Byakugan purity, preserving a line, Jingi dismissed it as hollow. Branding and control didn't increase purity, they only degraded people. From the start, the legacy system had been flawed. You say you represent the clan and want to negotiate compensation with me, Jingi said sharply. Frankly, there's nothing the Hyuga can offer that interests me, not money, not favors. He turned to leave. So why should I help you? Hayashi grabbed at him. Help me. I want to change the clan, but I need help. Help you? Jingi snapped. Go play in traffic. He didn't hold back. You, Hyuga Hiyashi, are no different from the main family you criticize. Why should I help you? Do you think I'm just another branch family dog to be bought off? Your legacy is rotten. I don't care for it. It'd be better if it died sooner. Hayashi's eyes burned with a mixture of shame and determination. He thought about breaking the system, but he was bound by it too. Even as the young patriarch, he was constrained by custom, by jutsu, by the very structure he wanted to overthrow. Someone like him, even with 100 years, could hardly change the clan alone. The real solution, Jingi argued, was radical. Either abolish the curse's controlling jutsu and remove the mark altogether, or brand everyone the same way so there is no distinction. Only then could the main branch divide be ended for good. Hiyashi didn't have that courage or that power. Any promises about changing the family were likely to become empty slogans. Hayashi walked toward the compound like a man in a daze, his hands in his sleeves, his face gone hollow. Young patriarch? The guard standing outside the Hokage's office nearly had a heart attack at the sight. Young patriarch, are you all right? Repeated calls drew Hayashi back. He gave a small mechanical nod. Regaining his composure, he resumed his usual measured expression and continued toward the clan compound. The guard exhaled in relief. This had been Hayashi's first time representing the Hyuga in such an important village meeting. If anything had gone wrong on his watch, the consequences for the guard would have been severe. Chapter 140. If you dare to do it on the first day, then I dare to do it on the 15th. I will not give up. Hyuga Hiyashi's hand, hidden in the sleeve of his kimono, clenched until his knuckles whitened. Hokage office. After the meeting, the third Hokage, Utatane Koharu, and Homura Mitokado remained behind. The three sat in uncomfortable silence, each reading the same helplessness in the others' faces. It looks like ordinary measures won't be enough to bring the pharmaceutical department back, the third Hokage said at last. Yes, Koharu agreed. This kid isn't very old, but he's far more troublesome than Tsunade. Homura rubbed his forehead. He had thought Tsunade difficult to handle, but he had never expected Jingi to be worse. The third Hokage had tried to use the casualties on the front to sway Tsunade. He knew she would go to the front for the sake of the village. The plan seemed to work. Tsunade handed over the Anbu to Jingi and went to the front lines herself. The next move was supposed to be contrived trouble that would provide a pretext to reclaim the pharmaceutical department. But the third Hokage had not anticipated Jingi overturning the table the moment their planted agent began to speak. Jingi exposed the logistics department's obstruction of raw medicinal materials and publicly scolded the head of the Shimura clan. He had made his position unmistakably clear. Even if it's messy, it has to be dealt with, Utatane Koharu muttered. Without the pharmaceutical department, the village's medical system is crippled, worse than a man missing a leg. And he even dared to contact Uchiha Fugaku in front of everyone, Koharu added hotly. Is he trying to warn us? Jingi had no ties to the Uchiha, and his move was clearly a message. Push me again, and I'll bring the Uchiha in. Their presence would complicate things in ways the Hokage office might not like. The plan failed. The third Hokage cut in. Don't let anger cloud your judgment. We need to fall back for now and regroup. We can't be rash. Then do we continue to withhold the materials? Koharu asked instinctively. Homura wanted to roll his eyes. Given how delicate things were, did they really dare to keep blocking supplies? Did they think the soldiers on the front wouldn't resent such a thing? No, the third Hokage said. We can't hold them back any longer. Send everything. The war comes first. Koharu bristled at having to yield, but she dared not argue further when Hokage-sama had decided. As for the pharmaceutical department, they would have to wait for another opportunity. Back at the Anbu office, Jingi received the report he wanted. Hokage-sama, the pharmaceutical department has announced they've released all the materials. Jingi smirked. Good. Tell them to produce every medicine the front requires without delay. But once they're produced, store the finished drugs in the central warehouse. No one is permitted to withdraw any of them without my order. So you like to withhold things, do you? You can block raw materials, and I'll block finished products. The initial news was out now and could not be retracted. If the Hokage office pushed too far, Jingi could simply expose them. It was their withholding that caused the production bottleneck. Nara Shikaku clicked his tongue. Looks like today's meeting put you in a foul mood, he said. It did, Jingi agreed, then laughed. They wanted the Shimura clan to step in and take back the pharmaceutical department. I refused. Then they asked me to assign Anbu to protect the merchant caravans buying supplies. I refused that as well. Family caravans? Nara echoed, incredulous. The village's caravans don't need Anbu protection. Exactly, Jingi said coldly. But family caravans, those assembled by clans like the Sarutobi and Shimura, expect state protection. They've grown used to having others cover for them. Nara felt speechless. Tsunade had often turned a blind eye to such things, sometimes lending a hand. After all, goods bought by these caravans ultimately entered the village and helped with the war effort. Supplies were as critical as soldiers. Even a large village like Konoha could not rely solely on reserves. A full-scale war between villages, barring exceptional circumstances or a lopsided victory, could drag on for years. The consumption of supplies over that time was staggering. The village had to secure both its own reserves and the purchases made by private caravans, and it should try to disrupt the enemy's external supply lines too. You're dismissed, Jingi told the Anbu who delivered the report. Yes, Hokage-sama. Wait, Jingi called as the Anbu was about to leave. Go to the archives. Bring me everything on the Shimura clan. I'll need their files. Yes, sir. When the Anbu left, Nara Shikaku's expression soured. Jingi wouldn't request the Shimura records without cause. He was lining up targets. Whether the third Hokage would step in to protect them was another matter. The Shimura clan had become pawns in the higher-ups' power struggle. That never ended well. Would Hokage-sama truly defend those who'd assisted him, as the Hyuga clan's fate had shown? Nara wasn't confident. It didn't take long for the archives to arrive. Jingi sifted through the yellowed folders with a practiced, impatient hand, careful, decisive. He wanted to make sure that next time anyone stuck their neck out, they would think twice. One file made him pause. An accidental killing of a villager? He murmured, reading. Nara put his own stack down and thought. I recall that case. Hokage-sama handled it personally. They paid a substantial compensation to the victim's family, and with the Hokage's involvement, the matter never escalated. As a former Jonin leader, Nara remembered the broad strokes of many incidents. Jingi looked at him with cool curiosity. Senior, was it really an accidental killing?